If you are watching this video tomorrow, you will be able to choose a 5 stars for free, and so on once every year. This we thought would never reach Genshin Impact, and above all the most repeated question in the video of which 5 stars to choose. That will be around here on screen. It was not only what 5 stars, but what constellation of 5 stars is worth it. So today, as you see in the miniature title, I bring you from the free 5 stars to choose which is the best constellation. So leave a good like, a good last of you, come subscribe. Thank you for watching the channel, thank you for supporting it. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, it helps a lot to the channel and team. It's recommended and positioned the video. We grow much more, so thanks. Run, I'm watching you. There, thanks for giving like. And now we are going with which is the best constellation of the 5 stars that we can choose for free tomorrow. Alright, well, remember that the order of the last video was as simple as that the characters that can contribute less to an account today, and that everyone has a spot niche team that maybe does make them play very well are Diluc. Chi-Chi, Dea and Kexing would be the 4 characters who contribute the least. Mona and Jean are 2 supports that are useful and would provide a little more, and the character that contributes the most accounts in general. Today it is Tignari. It is an excellent carry inside, but careful because Kinnick will come and already exists also Alhaitham. Although Tignari rivals and in some cases can overcome Alhaitham, so that is the order of the banners of the. Let's say choice of character, better said. But let's now enter into matter with constellations. Well, let's talk first about Chi-Chi's constellations. I think everyone knows that Chi-Chi has a 6 that makes it. It's a little weirdly written, but it's similar to Barbara's, and let's remember there was a shift to C2 versions in the Abyss, in which the cooldowns every time we restart the Abyss are reset with which constellations and is already tested and confirmed. Also reset each time we restart a room with which Chi-Chi's Cheek-Seeks, even if it has 15 minutes of cooldown, will be possible. Apply once for every reboot of room in the Abyss, and this is very good. What does Chi-Chi's Cheeks say? Relive all close team members who have been defeated and regenerate 50% of their lives. Well, this is a problem. Why? Because you can only be eliminated by 1 team member at a time. What does this mean? That literally, even if I say that you relive several members of the team, the reality is that within the Abyss, as long as, for example, they take you out of the carry because you're hitting, and they put you in there ahead of these that one-shot you, Chi-Chi, the Cheeks is activated, revives, but will not revive another character apart because it is only activated once every 15 minutes. What does this mean? That about the text is like, oh, that's good. It revives several characters, but about reality it's the same. That Barbara's Ching, what happens that Chi-Chi is a 5 stars kicks. To finish the explanations, the cone is more energy for. Throwing away the ulti that costs 80 and chi requires a lot of recharge if you intend to throw the ulti IT. Remember that the ulti marks the enemies and also heals the team, and when you enter with the main chi carry and give a D. The C2 gives you more damage to normal and charged attack, 15%. So the C2 is for when you play Chi-Chi carry. Let's quickly remember that here I have brought you some Chi carry videos, and live I've taught teams of Chi-Chi carry coming down. Rooms in 30 seconds with a team of Superconductor, plus Furina and Yellen with Hydro Consonants. T and D5, which does not serve Panama. And the C4 is rare. It is like a defensive contribution that, as you see, reduces a 20% attack to the targets. Basically marked by Chi-Chi's Marquita, which is just 1. You don't have to go too crazy. The C4 is useless. Cone and C2 are not important either. The C2 is for Kari, but well, it is curiosity, 15% is nothing. And the Cheek isn't interesting either, but it would be Chi's most interesting. It does the same thing as it does 6 practically. Only 6 years ago, just like Barbara revived you an easy character. Next character, let's talk about Diluc from the Lord of the Night. Well, I think a lot of people have Diluc Cheek-Seeks. Leave me in the comments which character 5 stars of the permanent have Shix in your accounts. In my personal case on the main account, the only one I have is Mona. I have Mona Chicks, and in fact it was the character that I would have liked to have Chicks, with which I am happy because the truth is very likely. And let's talk about the constellations of Diluc. Diluc constellations benefit their damage in the common rotation of Diluc Dark, where you do the 3 elementals. ulti, 3 elementals, and our equipment's mainly to Diandia of Melts. What's the reality about Dyla? That his best team with a lot of difference is a team of downers. With Xianyun, Fiorina, Bennett, or even some team instead of Fiorina putting in a cryo to melt. But it's best Fiorina for the damage bonus inflicted and combine it with double healer Bennett and Xianyun for all charges. So here's the important point of the matter. With which Dilucero as well as Chi-Chi in the descending teams gets their maximum potential because the maximum scaling that is used with Diluc is basically the scaling of your normal attack where the damage of the descending is reflected. But we go with Diluc, and I think everyone knows in the community that there are several great creators who have Diluc Shikse, and every time a Diluc comes out, they scream out of pain. First Constellation increases Diluc's damage by 15%, and other friends below 50% of life. This is interesting, and obviously, because in Abyss and others, including the descending ones, you will benefit. It's the cone with which whoever plays Diluc descending, if he doesn't have cone, is a constellation he deserves. C2, when Diluc gets hurt, his attack increases by 10% and his attack speed increases by 5% maximum 3 times, which would be equivalent to 30% attack. With Fiorina, so this well there is passively. You will not let yourself be struck in the abyss to be activated like this. Elemental, +3, last 3. These are irrelevant to descending Diluc is the truth. The C4 perform Fiery Edge that I think is the elementary following the sequence attacks increases considerably. 2 seconds later, he uses the Fiery Edge, increases the damage inflicted on the next Fiery Edge at 40% of 2 seconds. This is if you do the normal basic elemental Diluc combo. Basic elementary because it's giving you more damage in your elementary ability. On the meld team, maybe it's not bad if you play Dragon Strike, which is the theme right in the punch when you give a basic. Jumping towards the enemy gives you a jump with higher height and makes a descent without depending on Xianyun. This exists and you'll be looking at it in the background. Maybe it can help you by getting elemental after the Dragon Strike, but the reality is that as soon as you play downhill or Dragon Strike without Xianyun, each downhill has more climbing. That the damage of your elementary ability adding up the C4 with which same premise of the descending ones. And the cheese is weird, but basically, it's keeping the combo even allowing you to do much faster the basic elemental combo. Basic elementary says, after throwing elemental increases damage and normal attack speed by 30% of the following 2 attacks for 6 seconds. It says that of the following 2 attacks, not normal attacks, with which in theory also gives you damage in your elementary ability. Also, Burning Edge does not interrupt the sequence of normal attacks. So your normal attacks that you do within the basic element follow their normal chain, with which they will increase their escalation of damage, i.e., it will not be the attack, or it will not be elemental and this 89%, which is the first elemental stroke 89%, the first elemental stroke 89%, the first stroke that you see on screen. But it would be elementary 89, elemental 87, elemental 98, and there already, if you wait and make the next normal attack, would be the 4th. The 134% that is interesting, but the constellations as explained are focused on making their combo normal elementary school, and yet Diluc today his most viable team, and with differences are descending, with which I'd say maybe Diluc's cone, just like I told you the best one here is the Seeks in Diluc is the cone or collecting to complete. Make 6 all that you have more whales in the count and have the 5 stars of the permanent with constellations. And you want to be collectors, but really Diluc with the cone already benefits his team of downs, and little more we go with a Kaching that would be next, and Kaching his constellations if they are interesting for their damage, and most if they provide you something if you want to play a king team and take it to the sky. Kaching is mainly played and the most recommended team, and more like today is playing Brave. The first constellation says to use star. Return that basically this is the skill. Elementary, and I understand here it is. And it's also, I think it's the elementary in the second round when you transport while it's new. Present a wedge lightning when the wedge lightning is like you throw the first elemental, loose the wedge. And when you return to, pressure elemental transports you inside the wedge is a cut. A lot damage makes Kaching finally 50% more his attack. As a good electro year in the effect area at the starting point and reappearance, plus electro hits that with aggravation are boosted. And in its more damage in general, this is when it's given that it's normal and loaded with Kaching hit enemies affected by electro. Spoiler, in its perfect rotation of 15 seconds whether you play Kazuha Velatsara Kaching, or if you play aggravated the Hyper Carry Electro Monkey, or you play a 15-second aggravation team with Fischl Kazuha Velat or something. It basically gives you very little time to make 1 or 2 combos of normal and loaded, is not like the Keqing rotations do. A lot of time you are having a good time giving normal attacks, and loaded with the nice combo of Keqing, which is very nice, but this CD is unreservedly activated for those who really take advantage of Keqing. Says there's a probability 50% that an elementary particle once every 5 seconds. That means you're not gonna be more than 5 seconds doing this honestly. You're going to generate just 1 extra particle Keqing. Just has a cost of 40 in the ulti. That's nothing that the C2 does. That, as soon as you have to build it with about 110 of recharge, is useful good. Because it is well you save between 5 and 10 of recharge of energy with the extra particle. Apart from that, its elemental generates particles and its combo is elemental and 2 normal charged. And you go basically good then, normal loaded, not but a normal 1 charged, normal 1 loaded, and you leave, and that's the rotation. 15 seconds fast Keqing is not the best in the world. This is the last is 3 to do damage, and its main source of awe. This is when Keqing, who is an elemental reaction, wins 25% attack, is it. As a small bufo as an additional nobility, but to this day these bufos to be a C4 of 5 stars are too small. But it's like I said, they're all interesting and they all add up. This is the elemental +3, and this in summary is a lot of text, but it's bonus elemental damage electro that at the end of today again remains ridiculous to be a constellation. What it says is to make a normal attack a loaded and elemental viola, a definitive record. The combo is elementary, ulti elementally, a normal 1 loaded, a normal 1 loaded, i.e. at the end activates all these effects activated by normal attacks and avils are mental or independent loads. Each of the loads gives you 6% electrical damage. 6 by 4, 24 is 24 damage. 25 attack a particle to not build power recharge or stay at 110 and 2 extra hits each time. You throw your skill all to an extra hit every time you throw your elemental, and you come back with which 2 extra hits of electro that they do more damage as you see Keqing's constellations. There's no particularly interesting one. They all serve anyone who likes it. Keqing all add to the damage. All are as more or less equitable. The cheese obviously does not look like a cheeks of a character 5. Stas looks like a chicks of a 4 stars to this day. And because there's Keqing, I wouldn't say there's a particular special. For whoever likes Keqing, all are interesting for now. I would say that he does one of Dialec's all we've talked about is the most interesting thing we go with Day, because as you notice, I am going in order of those that least priority tends to get out. To those who more because they serve a lot of Day. Basically, I would tell you today that Mualani and Kinnick come that they do have a constellation. I'd say it's spectacularly powerful, and I highly recommend it. And here the video gets very interesting. Basically from Day, the cone increases a lifetime, the maximum life, by 20%, and then increases the damage of your ulti and your elemental in a proportion of your total maximum life with the cone. Starts to be worth it, especially with its weapon that gives you another 30 and peak 40% of 40% attack. To the passive, and 30 and peak % of life begins to be worth it to have a life clock and invest in life and not in attacking. With the cone and with the C2, that is the cone of Day, that is interesting. With the C2 makes your elemental in the field last 6 seconds. More with which this is super strong and super interesting, because they are going to activate burns for Mualani teams. And Kinnick for all the time that Mualani Kinnish are in the field. In fact, if by day it's not C2 and you pretend to play Mualani Kinnish with some pyro, you're going to have to sacrifice Xiangling on the Mualani and Kinnish teams where Xiangling won't vaporize. And maybe it's better for you to have Xiangling vaporizing on another team, and for Kinnick or Mualani to have a C2 Day rather than the ticks that makes Day is going to activate continuous burns with a Dendro, so Kinnick has his core cracking more burn. Or for Mualani to have his burn core this. I explain it more in the kit of Mualani Kinnish and in Surely Tomorrow. At the height of watching this video, I will upload the first impressions of Mualani, so if you are watching this video one more day late running to the channel because surely the first impressions are around, but the case with Dihai is that her C2 is spectacularly important, especially because until Mavuika exists, the Pyro Archon will be a 5-star Xiangling. And in my opinion, maybe a Xiangling cross with Dihaya. I think Dihaya's C2 is very important on the one hand for the mains days, so that your elementary ability lasts much longer. And for some strange cracking team that people play, but mainly Day with C2 to have your elementary ability in field as long as possible to have perpetual burn for maximize rotation of Kinnick's Mualani on the opposite side. There are enough already beta gameplays that many have, since you can already play Mualani in closed beta created from content, and there are videos of it, and you notice the teams who play Dihaya's 0, that Mualani's last strokes are not vaporizing because just finished Dihaya's elementary. And the last one, the last bite, and the last one neither vaporized by this very thing because the elementary one of Dihaya in the field lasts too little with this C2 lasts much longer so Dihaya cone, and C2 would say they are surprisingly important about. Alpha Kanisha Moalani, until the Archont Pyro the C3 is the last 3. The C5 is the elemental, +3 the C4 says hit, enemy with the lion on punctures or the incinerator, kick i.e. the ulti or the kick to the elemental Castella let recover. 1.5 of elemental energy and regains life. 2.5 of its maximum life once 0.2 is to regenerate more life for herself when you're throwing the ulti or the initial stroke of the elemental and more energy for yourself too because your ulti has cost 70 spoiler I think, using Dehaya. Especially until Mavuika comes out when you play Dehaya. As Alani Kimmich you're not going to throw the ulti so you don't care about the C4 and the CECs so that you want to play Dehaya. Carry increases the probability. Your ulti by 10 and increase the punches plus critical damage plus stories and so on, and increase the time of your ulti with which your ulti goes from 4 seconds to 6 seconds, and good Raiden for example with his ulti has 7 seconds. Zodea with chicks is finally a carry. I won't say decent though maybe yes, but at least Dihaya 6 can already do that. Correctly carry function to play Dehya Monopiro, or some kind of Dehya crackling or vaporizing with a Furin out of the field, such a thing then not bad. So if I would say that the most important both of the video and of Genshin in General Kon and C2 of Dehya, and last disclaimer with Dehya, if you don't have the sheiks to play the carry or something so you know that. Dehya's down with the same Diluc team doesn't scale as much as Diluc, but it's one of their best teams, in fact is better than any combination of Dehya, carry and field if there is no 6 Dehya team descending Dehya Fiorina. If in Yungben, it's exactly the same as Dehaya's best team, and to support that the C2 without throwing the ulti so surprise with Dehya, go with the 3 most important characters of the permanent being the 2 Jean and Mona and Tignari supports that Tignari has. Yours because according to which constellation you can overcome Al-Haytham well? We go with Mona that Mona is one of the favorites of many people by design, especially those who play most in the since 1.1 the primeval moments of Genshin. Mona has many important constellations, and in fact one of Mona's constellations is one of the most sought after throughout the game. Mona before entering the constellations, I have to say that it was best in slot in Permafrost with Ayaka Shenhe Kazuha. There are people who plays Kokomi instead of Mona for the comfort that Kokomi cures, and today the best in slot Permafrost is Fiorina, Xianyon Shenhe Ayaka. Then this has lowered it a minimum of category, but there are many people who play Fiorina and Xianyun in Yon. Other teams, for example a Diluc or Gaming Downs, with what that makes equal the Permafrost of Ayaka for a lot people, and now that you can use it in the Abyss in the first half, at least keep requiring Mona, but we don't know how many times. More will let us use Permafrost. Let us remember that Permafrost throughout Fontaine was one of the most unusable equipment, and they put rooms where literal could not play this team then. Mona was a bit of Mona ornament, other than that a team that as interesting as I told you is some combination of Hu Tao double hydro with Mona Dragon Casserole, so that it does not remain so difficult to hook, and also some kind of combination as second or third best in slot by Raiden Hyper, carry, i.e. Raiden Katsuha Bennett, and instead of Sara Chicks. If you don't have Mona with Gyo Armada and Gyo Armada Dragon Hunter because Bennett in that team he carries nobility, then knowing all this, what are the important constellations of Mona? Because well, first, Ko increases you by 15% the damage of reactions Hydro, and 15% the duration of Frozen, basically for Permafrost Connie. C2 is rare because it combines with Chicks, with which if you read C2, say Mona carry is not bad, and you can play Mona carry. In fact, once we have played it, you will be watching a gameplay of Mona carry background with Youngling doing 115,000 damage or pulling us off a rotation some enemy, but really the Mona carry is with Chicks, and if you don't make a correct combo with your elemental with the dashes to apply, and with the basic and the charged it has. Passive jumping does not apply enough Hydro with which to play Mona carry is very complicated, but in short the C2 is combined with the Chicks for the supposed Mona carry is that it says that to hit with a normal attack, there is a 20% chance to say 1 of every 5 theoretically before or after a load automatically jumps cooldown once every 5 seconds with Eddie. Which Mona in the field that will be about 10 seconds can get to jump 3 times this passive with comms, and you make it perfect. Serves the C2 for Mona carry, not the Sheiks, yes, but the C2 does not recommend it. The C3 is important because it is the last 3, And the last. 3 makes your ulti give you more bonus of harm inflicted on the enemies affected by that ulti, reaching up to 60% of damage received. Above an inflicted damage from enemies, and here comes the coolman. This constellation is one of the most sought after by almost all people who play Mona. When any team member attacked an enemy affected by an omen, the omen is the debuff that receive additional inflicted damage. The enemies that is activated with your ulti, the probability of the character increases. 15% summary is a 15% probability to the entire team for 5 seconds, which is what lasts the omen of Mona. But in permafrost, which is the bug of Genshin's whole life, that frozen enemies increase the duration of such omen. As long as the enemy stays frozen, at 7-8 seconds what they last, because maybe they don't last 5 seconds because they disappear, is 15% probability, almost permanent to the entire team in permafrost equipment, and this makes many permafrost equipment literally reach its members more than 80 or 90 probability, and all the damage jump critical. This is because the best in lot of the permafrost has always been with Mona. Apart from that, it can carry nobility and dragon hunter perfectly, the C4 of monkeys, of the most important and interesting of the permanent. This is the elemental +3, and finally, the cheeks, as I told you, and they. Chinks as carries as when entering illusory torrent. The passive Mona enter Hydra underground Mona has an increased 60% of its next attack loaded, because a second that moves. Spoiler, if you make basic days basic, give and do the dash 3. Fast times the 3 loads are activated and says the maximum bonus that can be reached is 180%, say 60%. 3 loads and the effect can last a maximum 8 seconds, say if you don't throw a load before it disappears in 8 seconds. Spoiler. The story is to give basic das very fast with Mona when you're doing the Mona carry to get her in. That basic is activated the C2 and strips some loaded while, and the application is pure to be clean by. I did all the beatings on a team of Mona, Kazuhas and Bennett, which is sort of an international of Tartaglia. But with Mona, carry is interesting if I have 80-90 loaded Mona, so it is curious if it is for a showcase, if it is a recommended team. Tartagliacero is better than Mona Chicks as a carry, so forget about the cheeks literally. The important thing Mona is to be support with we. The C4, that if we're talking about a hyper carry rate in the situation, I told you also serves the C4. And if we're talking Butao no, Team Double Hydro with Mona Dragon Hunting is exactly the same, and also works very well, come on, with Jean. And finally, we'll go with Tignari and Quiet. I think I've already uploaded the Tignari build. You'll ask me about her. Mire Felicity Tignari is the best character to choose from in the permanent. They will be built, if in fact already in the channel is here, so go. See her Jean context, her always on all occasions and all teams, and it's very important. I say it will be worse than Xianyun, with which if you already have Xianyun, don't get warm. In Jean's constellations, everything. Any occasion, any team, any combination is going to be better with Xianyun, but if you don't have Xianyun Jean, no. Nothing wrong with so many teams of Anemo. Maybe with Scaramouche, maybe with Xiao, if you don't have Xian, of course. Like combining as a healer Anemo Green Shadow with Furina to activate all loads. That is the real context and situation. Jean who helps us Jean, because you already know that the 2 and C4 are very interesting. The cone makes the speed of attraction of your elemental by holding down more than a second be much faster and increase damage 40%, you will say, and I will say if friends. Jean has a mechanics that with your elemental kept together the enemies as the traveler Anemo with his elemental. And sometimes there are very rare teams of Jean picking up the enemies by throwing them in the air and getting harmed by. Physical fall of 200-300,000 is used. Is not useful, you did not know, possibly. Not if you did not know to leave, like, and leave in the comments. Jean for algorithm, because it is interesting information that not many people know. C2, one of its interesting when Jean picks up an arduous elementary particle. That's why you have to throw ulti elemental in Jean's combo, and also have Favonius. For elemental or ulti to generate more particles with Favonius, increases the speed of movement by 15% of the total area. Computer, basically this is used to increase the speed of attack of the carries of normal attacks in field, basically. Teams of perhaps Alecchino, although Alecchino doesn't do much with Jean. I don't know if it affects the load of Nouvelet, because the attack speed is usually normal. Although now a lot has talents that increase speed. But I don't know for teams from Ayato for Sanfair equipment. I don't know, Scaramouche maybe, and you combine the C4 with a C2 to give you more attack speed, but John C2 gives you 15 attack speed that takes advantage of some team this. Is the last is 3 indeed. This is to cure more, but spoiler to Chero, with the last level 7 already has overheating. So, it's the same, and it's C4 in the context I've told you, and especially in Anemo teams mainly with Scaramouche or Xiao. Basically, the Anemo resistance of enemies within the ulti is reduced by 40% if you have already lowered resistance Anemo. Because you go with Faruzan, which also reduces resistance Anemo, would be equivalent to a 20% additional damage inflicted by the element. Anemo summarizes that I explained it many times when there are constellations of resistances and you have already lowered resistances in team by a green shadow or by a character that eliminates resistances like Faruzan, then to combine with Scaramouche and release. A Bennett or combine with Xiao, if you don't have Xianyan, is a good constellation, is really interesting, and indeed Scaramouche. Free Bennett playing John C4 with that talent plus that talent for Scaramouche that gives him more attack speed is strong. Doesn't beat Bennett, but he's strong, and he's a very good substitute for Bennett for you to have a Scaramouche Faruzan Furina. Jean, for example, and Scaramouche Faruzan Zhongli Jean, or Scaramouche Faruzan Katsuhada, for example, teams of Scaramouche and releases. A Bennett for another team. If you are main Anemo, then play Xiao Furina Xianyun Bennett, and then play Scaramouche Faruzan Katsuhada and Jean C4. And for example, you are the main Anemo par excellence because you can play two very powerful teams of Anemo, with Scaramouche and Xiao as carries, for example. Then the C4 is interesting above all to play as that with Scaramouche. With Xiao, and with Haizao, I don't forget to punch. This is the elemental +3. And this is mitigations IEE, that you get less harm but are less mitigations than what Xingqiu gives you to Chero. Or what gives you Beidou to Chero, if friends mitigates. From Jean Jinya, 5 stars chinks are less than what you give Xingqiu Beidou to Chero, which our 4-star spoiler could combine. With Xingqiu Beidou, and if anyone is lucky enough to play a team of Xingqiu Beidou Jean without any kind of shield, they will notice that it doesn't put your life down and say it doesn't lower my life because Jean is healing me or because I'm not getting the test done. This is very funny as a mechanics that Genshin never exploded, that are mitigations, that is, that you get less damage than should receive without having shield and can be combined, says, within the field of the ulti. The damage received is minute 35% of the get out of the effect lasts 3 seconds, plus basically 3 attacks plus forgiveness, or 10 seconds basically if you combine it. With Xingqiu Beidou you don't know what's going on because you don't know why you have to be inside the ulti if you're getting well, or it's that they're not hitting you and literally this is weird. It's crazy. It's very interesting. But they haven't exploited this mechanics. In Jean the C4 for the Anemo teams that I have told you, or the C2 general for the speed of attacks if you really take advantage of it, on some team where Jean and Furina are combined. And we go with Tignari to finish the video, the most interesting character of all the permanent, and in fact its constellations are also. And spoiler is similar to Jean. Tignari is very similar forgiveness. Jean Tignari is very similar to Kexing forgiveness. All his constellations are interesting. There is none with a special contribution. The character, but if you like Tignari very much or want him to overcome Al-Haytham, basically, you have to choose constellations of Tignari. So the cone 15 probability on the Tignari loads here is one thing I always explain and people don't understand. The half of the damage Tignari is it's loaded, the other half is its ulti broad features approximately, with the difference that there are 3 loads and sometimes you get interrupted one, and the ulti is an infallible directed damage when you cast it, with which it is 15-year probability on your loads affects half of the damage. That is less safe to say. I don't know why people as this constellation builds 15 less probability in Tignari. I see people with Tignari 55 probability people if there is. That builds 70-75 probability. And if you have cone better because your loads will have 90 probability. But the probability real or the real contribution of Tignari is its ulti is its half source of damage which is infallible. This does not mean that you have to build less probability. The opposite is an extra damage to your loads. That is very good. But your probability, it must be stable without having the cone and having it so it's interesting. But I find it even bad because it goes and tease people because people don't understand how Tignari works, either the probability or a phrase that's pretty short to read in fact. But there, you have the explanation is interesting, it brings damage, but do not neglect the probability still having it cone. The C2 is very strong, and it's the one that would equal you to Al-Haytham. The C2 gives you 20% bonus damage inside everything, just if an enemy is within your elementary compatibility that you generate with your elementary ability. This is crazy. It's a lot of damage, and it's 20% that you can add up to all of Tignari's damage, because the whole date isn't even inside this. is the last stress that, again, adds a lot of damage, and in this case, a lot of damage to your source of stable damage, which cannot be missed, which is your Ultim. This is 120 Masters points, for I understand that Tignari and the rest of the team with which the whole team will hurt. But above all, Tignari with the C4 can match the 1000 Masters so that his talent, the one that adds us here, is the one that we add damage to your ulti and your cape loaders that cape in 1000 because it is an additional 60% damage in everything you do. Very strong and very interesting. This is your elemental +3 that serves no purpose. The CR5 Tignari is useless and the cheek sit. It's faster on all your loaders, but after the 3 loaders that cast very fast, your elemental allow you. The same rotation include 1 or 2 more loaded even if it takes a little longer, and in the end, you do much more damage with this Tignari cheek ship because you put 2 extra loads, so the Tignari constellations are very interesting, but mainly the C2, the C3. The C4, in fact I already say from C2 with good construction, can overcome Al-Haytham with C3. It eats it because Al-Haytham does not have so much contribute its constellations and forego, and in fact, I said it in many places, I personally for the potential to get Tignari constellations, and not to be a promotional and not to spend promotional wishes like Al-Haytham. I recommend Tignari very much for. Above Al-Haytham more than 0 is incredible and overcomes Tignari, but from all this then today, and more with the 5 free stars is quite normal to be able to get Tignari 4 times ago. Crush Al-Haytham so nothing the C5 remember is useless. And chicks because it hurts you more, but it's not Tignari's C3, C4 panacea either. You already have a monster literally and a little bit more. These are the best constellations to choose C2, C4 from Jean, C2, 3, 4 from Tignari, Cone, and C4 from Mona and Cone, and C2 from Leaving. Chin all serve is not as bad of Diluc the Cone of Chi-Chi the Tixi, but as curiosity, and basically this is that of characters as of characters that contribute less to what they contribute more. If you have doubts, I would recommend above all Cone and C2 to leave it, so you use it if you like it, and the constellations of Tignari. Maybe you don't play Permafrost with Mona because it's situational. Maybe you don't play the C4 Jean because it's also situational, so watch out for Mona and Jean because they're situations, and maybe you don't play teams, but those who do contribute, as I say, is Cone C2 to leave if you use leave in general, and 3, 4 and Forgiveness. 2, 3 and 4 of Tignari would be the most. Oh, I thought it was going to be longer. I said take care. Thank you very much. By the support of the channel, if you have not forgotten to this point, the video, and until the end, let a like, subscribe, bell, comment for algorithm ears, for algorithm, Jean, for algorithm, character free, for algorithm that we never expected. Take care of yourself very much, and until the next